This episode of the Wedding Film School Show is brought to you by MusicBed, the best music licensing platform for wedding filmmakers. Head over to themusicbed.com and enter our code WFS on checkout to get a free month on your annual wedding subscription. Now, on to the show.
So, we have a guest today, Jared. Who is it?
We have Andrew Abajian, a filmmaker, photographer, director, and just all-around cool guy.
When I do weddings, it's understanding and revealing what's this underlying narrative that these two people share that's brought them together, and how do you tell that story that's not just based around like one particular day.
I loved kind of what you were touching on there, which is how do you take an abstraction, which is a relationship that is materializing in one day, and make that one day represent this abstraction.
I like to approach weddings the same way I would if I was on any other production, looking for some underlying narrative structure that's different from Vows. I think when you pair that with really good music and good cinematography, then you can make really, really compelling films that are just visually engaging. They have a different sense to them. And that's always been the structure upon how I've tried to lean into and continue to grow that and get better.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wedding Film School. My name is Jared, here again with my business owner, co-partner, all these things, Jason McCutcheon. How's it going, Jay?
It's going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I feel like every other week we're getting sick up here in the Northeast. It's just kind of one of those years.
I think it's called having a 2-year-old.
Having a 2-year-old is definitely a big part of it.
Yes.
For sure. And she's not even in daycare, so I'm like, where did she pick these things up?
I think it's because children are weak.
Yeah, well,
they're just weak bodies. They're just absorbing every illness that comes their way, and then they but they're also generous, and so they'll share with you. And so it's one of those things. And I mean I've been there. My child is sick as well, literally today. So I get it. I just think of it like this: in every way, parenting just makes you stronger, Jared.
Yeah.
You spend your early you get strong, you get through high school, you get tough, right? And then you spend your 20s just becoming weak again, right? And then you have a child, and it's like you got to get toughened up for that last stage of your life. And I think that's parenting in general. So before we get into today's guest, which I'm really excited about, I wanted to just remind people that if you're interested in, it's great to listen to a podcast, and it's great to join a Facebook group and have conversations. But what's really great, I think, is to actually take your work, put it in front of someone who knows what they're talking about, or doesn't in my case, but put it in front of someone and have get feedback. And so I always encourage people, we do a weekly film critique on the channel, Wedding Film School. If you would like critique, if you want to get better, if you just want to hear a different perspective, I think that's value is it's not about objective, right? I know and you don't. I have a different perspective. I have a different way of looking at your work than maybe you do. And so I think it's always good to get outside perspective. So we have a lot of fun on this show, right, Jared?
Yeah, I think so. Usually every single week, in addition to being helpful, hopefully it's also entertaining and fun.
People did not like our Ray Roman. They were mad at me because I was interrupting Ray.
Oh, yeah.
But I was going to say this. I was like, if you had a conversation with Ray,
you have to interrupt Ray. Yeah, to ask him an actual question. Otherwise, he'll just be...
He'll go.
He
will just go. So regardless, want to encourage you, head over to weddingfilm.school. There's a little, live film reviews or critique, or I forget what the button says, but it's right at the top.
Yep. Click
on it and submit a film. The only thing I let people know is if you want to support the channel, we do have memberships over on YouTube for you to join. If you want to just support us, but also if you want to get some priority in the line for film critiques. So that is my shameless plug today, Jared.
So submit, and then also every Thursday, this is when this is happening, every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Submit your films within 24 hours if you even want us to see them, I would say. So.
And I would say this is as of March 23. If you're listening to this in some future time, we might have changed the date, but we'll always do film critiques.
Good disclaimer, Jay. I love it. So
we'll always do film critiques. It's part of our DNA. So we have a guest today, Jared. Who is it?
We do. We have Andrew Abajian. Andrew is a filmmaker, photographer, director, and just all-around cool guy. Andrew, it's awesome to have you on the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
and you're coming to us from California today, but you are soon to be a native Tennessean. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Currently in Orange County, California, born and raised, never left, but doing a massive move, massive shift to Nashville, Tennessee in just over 3 weeks. So it's coming up pretty
Nice.
quick.
Big. I love
So-
both areas. Nashville is probably one of my favorite places to be. I think if we didn't have so much going on up here, that would definitely be an option for my wife and the family. But yeah, man, that's pretty exciting.
Ironically, it's like in my head, I've always said like, oh man, if I were to ever move, where would I move? You know, you kind of like romanticize where you might go or what you might do. And then I was like, you know what? I want to be a cowboy, but I don't want to move to Texas. So Nashville is like always been in the back of my head of like, maybe just maybe one day.
Yeah.
See, I want to be
might
one
get
of those.
that chance.
I want to be one of those Rich Jackson Hole cowboys.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
That would be nice to be one of those cowboys.
So Andrew, kind of describe some of your work for someone who's listening to the show who maybe hasn't watched some of your films, which I would recommend to everybody who is on here. Go on to Instagram, take a look at your work, but kind of describe your films, describe your work, and just kind of what's important when you're making wedding films.
Yeah. I mean, a word I try to lean into for a theme is cinematic. I think a lot of over the years, people describe my work as cinematic or vibey or sometimes epic. And for me, being someone that comes from a background of going to film school and the ultimate goal one day being a writer, director, or a DP on something, and having background in photography that started in journalism and editorial work. When I do weddings, it's part documenting, but another part of that is kind of understanding and revealing what's this underlying narrative that these two people share that's brought them together, and how do you tell that story that's not just based around like one particular day. Like I tell clients all the time, like this is about your love story, but we're just so happy to jumping in to tell it on this one day, on your wedding day. And so I like to approach weddings the same way I would if I was on any other production, looking for 3 acts, looking for some underlying narrative structure that's different from Vows, to lean into. And I think when you pair that with really good music and good cinematography, then you can make really, really compelling films that are just visually engaging. They have a different sense to them. And that's always been the structure upon how I've tried to create or try to lean into and continue to grow that and get better as a director in everything I do. So I think cinematic is the main underlying theme that we try to build on when I go out and do something.
I think like you kind of touched on something there, and we'll get into it probably later, but just a definition of cinematic, right? Like I think people use cinematic to mean bokeh or has a drone or just
a video camera
good
in
looking,
general.
right?
Yeah.
Like what they mean is it looks better than my phone.
Right.
Like a lot of people are like it's good looking or there's a gimbal push, which I think is funny because I almost never see a gimbal in a real movie. But I mean all that stuff. That being said, to me, when I think cinematic, I think exactly what you said. Like I always tell Jared, like I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan, right? And when I take I always refer to The Shape of Stories, where they just draw out like this is a story arc. This is a traditional story arc, and it's almost like I loved like kind of what you were touching on there, which is how do you take an abstraction, which is a relationship that is materializing in one day, and like make that one day represent this abstraction.
Yeah.
Like how do you do that, right? And it's all about narrative threads and like all these things. And I think that's really smart. You see that with all the best filmmakers, whether it be like Alex Douglas in Sculpting with Time, like he might do something a little more actually really abstract, like dealing with time or dealing with themes like that. And then there's like more down to earth themes about relationships and people. For you, like, you mentioned this, like, how do you go about kind of extracting that from the couple, understanding what the themes are, and then pulling on that string a little bit and kind of inserting it into the wedding day? Like, what do you do to get so that your films are more than just documenting a day and they become cinematic and they become a story?
Yeah. One thing I do at the top is I'm asking new couples inquiries, like, what's their favorite movie? Like, that is the last question in like my first initial response to any client. I want to start to get a feel for what are they attracted to in cinema? Like, what, is their comfort film, or what is their director that they like? Because then I learn a little bit about who they are, and then I can start almost framing a bit of a narrative arc based on like that attraction. So you find common ground. So it's like if they're like, oh, I love Christopher Nolan movies, and it's just like, okay, awesome, we can go nuts with this couple because they really like those kind of movies, and their love story can come out of that. Or others, it's more like rom-coms,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that relational building and just getting to know them and figuring out music beforehand, as well, it helps you frame up, okay, what can I do creatively to create that narrative arc that's not Vows? And I'm pretty adamant about that because I've watched so many filmmakers out there that are wedding filmmakers where they're always using Vows as the narrative arc, and I think that's fine. I think you can do that, but I think when it comes to Vows, everyone always kind of makes these overextended promises, or you get lines like, I vow to do the dishes when I'm tired, and things like that. And to me, that's not necessarily, that's not necessarily like romance. And it's really hard as a director being like, okay, how do we make a movie out of this that doesn't feel necessarily like cheesy because the lines.
Well, it's also like not authentic to who, like we all have seen that groom who's giving vows, who it's actually nothing about who they are.
Yeah.
It doesn't represent their personality at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't even represent the relationship. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a ritual,
Yeah.
Like, I'm not anti that, but it's like one of those things. I totally get it. It's how do you get someone's authentic personality out of? You can't just use vows.
Yeah. Yeah, because that right there that's documentarian style, and you're just going to capture what comes out. And this, to me, cinematic. You're trying to direct something a little bit more out of them, a little bit more intimate, a little bit more authentic. So a lot of questions through the days. And when I first started, we actually were doing like on-camera interviews, which I don't do anymore because it's harder to get time.
Yeah.
I probably pissed off so many photographers being like, hey, can I just steal the couple for 10 minutes, like without you around, so I can sit them down and have a conversation. And we used to ask the same questions to them separately. And then their film, they didn't get to know what the other person said until we released the film. And that became the narrative arc, is them telling and sharing these different things. And one of the questions that we used to ask was, what does the other person's love for you mean to you? Like, really touch on the point, like they're saying yes to you forever on this day. Can you tell me like how does that make you feel?
Did you do that before or after the
before?
Ceremony? Okay.
Before. And those authentic pauses, those beats, those moments of emotion, as they're preparing for that, ritual, this big moment, I loved it. Like, I loved it because it was those moments where I was like, we're making a film. We're not sitting here as wedding films. We're actually like making something that it feels very emotional and intimate and authentic, and it was beautiful, and I loved it. We don't do on camera anymore, but I still ask a lot of those questions as we're in the day, and just allowing those kind of moments to just take shape, because you're engaging with the couple. You're showing them that you're an advocate for them and that you care, and that you want to celebrate with them. And I think that intentionality allows a little bit more honesty to come out in the way you're framing or doing different things. And then you can roll camera, and be in it with them. And I think that's where you start getting a difference between cinematic and documentary is one, you're just there to just receive and go cut. And the other one, you're there, I think, to add a little bit more intentionality, a little bit more relational direction with a couple, and then see what kind of responses you're getting out of that.
Yeah. It's something that I love about your films, Andrew, is like you've always tried to look at different perspectives and kind of customize it to the couple. I think, you were one of the first people I saw. The first film that I saw from you, you were one of the first people I saw use voiceover completely, shot, recorded on a separate day using maybe even like a voice actor to either recreate the vows, or I don't even know where that source audio came from. It almost seemed like stock audio of like a Joyce poem or something that was just incorporated into the film, and it was just beautiful. It was like incorporating something that maybe was near and dear to the couple to showcase who these people were. And I thought that was super creative and really awesome. How do you think you get the buy-in from the couple? Do you ever have people that reach out and they're like, hey, we want this super, artistic, cinematic type wedding film, but maybe it's harder to get them to buy in? Or do you think everyone who's approaching you kind of knows the deal, they're bought in? Like, kind of explain maybe that part of the process, because I think that's hard for a lot of aspiring filmmakers to, like, do you put what comes first, the egg, or does the chick come first, kind of thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, first, no, I don't get clients that are they're not always all this. I mean, a lot of them, I would say 90% of them, are still nervous to be in front of the camera. They're still a little nervous about maybe some of the concepts, like I've had couples where last second I just was like, you know what? We're in a spot right here. Can you guys just speak affirmations over each other? Like, spur of the moment, on the fly, and in their nervousness, they go for it, they do it, and you get kind of like that nervous laughter, that awkward, but to me, I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm passionate about what I'm doing and the way I'm communicating it and showing that excitement, being like, and that encouragement. I think that's how you get people to have some buy-in. And others, they're like, no, we're good. We just want to use vows, and that's totally okay. And that happens all the time. And I'm not anti-vow or speeches. I think that those are great windows into also seeing who they are and what they're about. But I think it's a little bit about taking some of those risks and putting out the ask, and then selling it with your own passion, being like, I think this would be really cool. Like,
I was telling that to a planner the other day. Cause like, part of my job is to like convince planners to let me do things that I want to do, because we're firmly in like, we have to work with wedding planners to get the budgets. And, some of them are like, oh, because I think the thing with planners is they all think they might, by the way, know the couple better than you. But they're really confident about that. And so you'll be like, something I want to do. And they'll be like, well, I don't know if they're really that type of couple. And exactly what you said, I'm always like, let me talk to them. Let me try to get them excited. Let me sell it. And I think that's the key, is like, when you get a gig as a creative professional, you're not done selling. You have to keep selling your ideas. And some of that is exactly what you said. Like, if you're enthused and pumped, that's going to be something that you can use to pitch the idea and make people more comfortable. It's like, trust me, you're going to look amazing. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so fun. Like, have you found, most of us are on like kind of this career trajectory, right? You're charging a little more, you're doing a little bigger weddings and all that. Have you found that as you kind of make your way up the ladder, so to speak, that you have to sell your ideas more, because maybe you got to get that buy-in. You don't have the time. How has that changed your filmmaking? Because it's very personal, very intimate, as you've kind of grown your business.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to sound weird, but I feel like weddings are all going to have a flow the same way, regardless of the budget up or down. I think it just always comes down to that relationship with the couple. And I think that's never going to change. So you always have to be really passionate about what you're doing and what you're trying to create in your collaboration effort, and being okay taking shots and being shot down, because the couple, like, they might not, agree to everything. And I've had small budget weddings where they wanted nothing, and it was a really hard day as a creative, because the sandbox is very small that you're working within and trying to do your best to pull out a good narrative line. And then I've had the biggest weddings in the world where they're like, do whatever you want, like we're in, and it's like, and you feel released. But I think at the end of the day, you're still going to put out the best possible work that you can do as a filmmaker, because I think you got to really care about what you're doing to begin with, to have that kind of passion and mentality. I mean, the big weddings are more fun, but sometimes again, you get the big wedding and you have no time. Like you said, the coordinator is running the show. The photographer is, over dominating, and you're just kind of strapped to do and take what you can get on a day when you feel like you should be able to have such more large scale, creatives and concepts and so forth.
Yep, totally. Let's talk about that relationship, because I think you're an interesting person to talk about photographer relationship, because you are a photographer. And for a while you were you splitting it 50-50, or were you doing kind of mostly films and some photo? Like how did that kind of come about?
Yeah. So I actually started as a photographer. Actually, no, take it back. I was doing both. I've always been doing both. I was gonna say I started in photography, but then I realized like my first year running and was actually doing like one of my first films that kind of introduced me to weddings was Drew Holiday and Lauren Holiday. So Drew Holiday plays for the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks, and Lauren Holiday at the time was on the U.S. women's soccer team when they were doing World Cup stuff. So that was like one of the first films I did, and the only reason I got into that is because I did the coordinator's film.
Cool. Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, we're in, and I started taking what I knew how to do and trying to apply it to weddings. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing from a wedding perspective. I was just trying to do what I knew how to do from a filmmaker production standpoint. But when it started, I was like getting more photography weddings than video, because video wasn't that popular yet.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 2013, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if it was around, it wasn't good. Like even when I got married myself, like I didn't have a video done, which is so odd to say, because there was nothing that was catching my attention that I thought would be worthy of the investment of it. So photography is where it started, and I was shooting on film photography. I was on a Contact 645. I was trying to run with the big boys who are doing it really, really well, and trying to make friendships and learning that model of how do you do fine art wedding photography and editorial work and do it well. And so when I started getting into wedding films more and realized that's where my passion was more aligned, it was trying to, you take the eye of what they have, and you have to understand what they're trying to accomplish, because I feel like light is harder for the photographers than it is for a cinematographer.
Totally agree.
And so you kind of start building that trust, being like, hey, I'm gonna, I'm here. We're gonna advocates for the couple, but let me know what you need. I'm gonna back you up. I'm not gonna interject a ton. I'm gonna, if I'm, grazing your shot, just let me know. Just, strong communication, building that kind of like friendship, so they also feel like they can trust you on the day, that, it's colleague work. It's not one greater than the other. It's not I'm better at my craft than you, or the whole competition model.
Yeah.
It's really understanding what they're trying to accomplish and hope that you can communicate to them as well as what you're trying to accomplish. And then hopefully you build that kind of tandem on the day of being like, let's stack hands, man. Let's make this a great day for our clients, which is the couple. Let's celebrate them. Let's advocate for them. Let's just do good work that we both are really proud of, and try to build that strong relationship. So I'm always kind of gazing what lens they're using, so I know how tight or not tight I might be able to go. And then in those situations, just communicate, being like, hey, when you're done with this shot, is it okay if I frame something up? 9 times out of 10, they're always like, oh, absolutely. Like, because I'm communicating. I'm not trying to rush in while they're framing something. I give them their moment with knowing that they're going to give me mine, I guess is the better take. And I think photographers really appreciate that. I'm attempting to speak their language. It's like when you travel, and you've picked up a little bit of Spanish.
Yeah.
It may not be great, but the locals might be a little bit happier that you're trying.
Yeah.
I actually think that's like one of the biggest things, like, because I don't know if you know Binge, but we were talking about Binge before the show, and like Binge will always say, like, what's important, like what I was always taught is look at the other person's focal length and just do longer. Right? And that's, you can't always do that, but in general, it's like the idea of like, hey, I literally every wedding, Jared, ask the photographer I'm working with, what focal length are you on during every portrait session? And they're always like, oh, I'm on 50.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm on a crop sensor, so blah. And like, I should be able to do like, I don't know that it matters, but I've always imagined that they appreciate it. Like, like I think just knowing that the person you're working with wants you to succeed matters a lot.
And they're just thinking about you and being conscious. I think that's a huge thing. Andrew, your perspective is so interesting because having your work be so cinematic, you know, I think some other filmmakers might be like, oh, he must be asking for like 50-50 time. Like you do photography and now it's video time. And like I've seen a lot of filmmakers, especially a lot of inexperienced filmmakers, be like, hey, this is what I expect of my films. And seeing someone like you who's successful, whose work is just gorgeous, be like, you know, at the end of the photographer's, you know, session, 9 times out of 10, I'll be able to have my own kind of thing, but I'm not kind of forcing the issue. I'm still making friendships. I'm not, you know, throwing my elbows around. I think that's so important for wedding filmmakers to hear because you don't want to be that guy. You know, you want to make friends. You want to, you know, we have endless guests come on and just be like, it's a team effort, right? To get what you want, you have to be a good team member. And so that everyone's getting exactly what they want. Still speak up. I think that's important. But at the end of the day, like, hey, this is a team. We're a unit. Like, hearing a photographer's perspective on wedding filmmaking, I think is a big deal. So.
Yeah. And I mean, light, when it comes to both genres, light matters.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking for like the best light, the best location. And, you know, the photographer is going to create a static moment. And so within that, you know, as a filmmaker, you could take and kind of see, okay, I see what he's going for. I see the ultimate goal of where he's trying to go, but I might have them move a different way.
Yeah.
So it's just, you just communicate that, you know, and, or you communicate on location option and being like, oh my gosh, that light over there is so cool. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Those little things like that. And, you know, as a photographer, like I love the collaboration as a cinematographer. And I think most photographers, no, obviously I'm not saying all photographers are like that. I mean, I've been doing this 10 years. I've had some pretty horrific experiences. I won't say any names.
Oh, that was my next question.
But
who is your least favorite?
Who's the worst?
Yeah, no.
I have some stories too. So yeah.
I think I love that discussion about light and even talking about like composition. I don't think a lot of filmmakers understand that photographers need symmetry in a way that filmmakers can kind of skirt around a little bit. I think like you have to have the rock behind the couple in a certain place, where video you can kind of like zoom in and get your letterbox thing and like make things look pretty cinematic.
Well, and you have motion. That's I think the biggest thing is like one of the and you guys, I'm not a photographer. So from my perspective, I think a lot of photographers like boring light. I'm always like, all they want is flat light. They're looking for a place where they can have them walk and it's all shadow the whole time, or everything is just, and I'm always like, oh, I want motion in my light. I want to use flares because I'm trying to create that movement. But I understand that. And I think that's the difference is like, I'm watching this photographer and I'm like, I look at their Instagram. I'm like, okay, this is all, they're going to pop those highlights in post. They're going to do X, Y, and Z. Everything's going to be done in post. It's like they can't have anything. They can't lose any information in their sensor. Everything has to be blah. I'm not going to ask that guy to do something that's going to ruin his look. Mm-hmm. Like whatever he's setting up, that's what he's comfortable editing. That's what he's comfortable delivering. And that's what the couple paid for. They paid for that look. And I think that's important for you to know. I think it's also important to know that and you guys can also correct me if I'm wrong here, every so often, people get in ruts creatively. And if you got a good idea and you let them do their thing, make sure they're like, hey, I can go home from this wedding and I have a nice little portfolio. And then you can say, can we try that light over there? Every so often, I've done this so many times, Jared, where I present a certain light environment to someone and the photographers have said to me afterwards, I would have never thought to choose that light, but I love my photos. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like that empathy, listening, caring, noticing, and realizing like what I am trying to do is different. Come along with me. Like we're on the same team. Let's do it. So more on the subject, because I'm not a photographer. like I said. I would love to hear from a photographer's perspective how you have taken your posing editorial skills and kind of like how does that directly translate into your filmmaking skills. And I think in particular, I'm always interested in the posing and working with people in that portrait environment.
Yeah. See, so for me, I think I've benefited coming from a cinematography background going into photography.
Okay.
Interesting.
Because I was always motion conscious. I always call it creating the scene. I'm going to give them a home base, but I want them to move and freely move within that, as if I'm setting up a scene that I'm going to direct. So I do that. How I would frame up something for cinematography is how I frame it up for photography. So it gives me the latitude to be able to kind of create a similar look between photo and video, because at the end of the day, like they are the same thing. I mean, you're literally looking at a static moment to a motion picture. I love approaching them the same way I would. Obviously the technicals change just slightly, but I like posing that feels authentic to something that would be in a movie, not the parent pose, which obviously that stuff's important. I mean, the photographer, and I'm sure every photographer is like, yeah, we have to get that. It's not, I want to get that. It's, we need the picture that the parents are going to print and put on the mantle. Otherwise we're going to have a conversation after.
Yeah. It's efficient to get it done that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get these moments of like, okay, man, let's ramp up the romance. Let's add in some movement. Let's add in some motion. Like one of my favorite poses is one to backlight, because I'm coming from cinematography. I want to be able to move and see the light change on their faces or cut through or do something different. And I like to get them backlit, bring them together, and then I tell the bride to essentially like tease the groom with a kiss, like flirt with him to the max without kissing. They may feel awkward, but you're having them sway, move. She can kind of go wherever she wants to go, and you can create this moment in photography that looks stunning and beautiful, as if there's movement and it's authentic and it's not posed. It's them being in a moment together. But for cinema, then also you can have these pan ins and outs, this rack focus, this movement, this big, and it creates this little just intimate, subtle moment, this little beat in between the chaos of the day where something's being told, something's being said, and you're not sure what it is. It's because that's just between the couple and the way that they interact with each other and flirt with each other. Yeah. And so the way I pose is from that. So I'm inversed. When I'm doing photography, I'm thinking about cinematography, and that's a blessing.
Yeah. But do you find though that like that direct, because and then Jared too, I'd love to hear from this. Like, I think how the posing works is one thing. A lot of filmmakers have never posed anyone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're coming from documentary, they show up, they're just riding the coattails, they're shooting over the shoulder of the photographer, and in some environments you don't get to, right? There's only one session and it is what it is. You got 5 minutes with the couple. I've been to those weddings. And so they kind of show up and they shoot a pretty good film off the photographer's poses. What would you say to a filmmaker who is like, okay, I want to start posing people and getting them to feel comfortable on camera the way the photographer does. I want to know what to say, because sometimes they'll be like, oh, hey, do you need anything? And, we work with enough filmmakers. I almost never heard a filmmaker say, can we have them do X, Y, and Z, or even talk to the couple and be like, that's so good. Let me inspire you. Let me get you, like, kind of, you're putting that in there. So what would you say to a filmmaker who's like, okay, I suck at posing. I'm very uncomfortable with it. I don't know what to do. It just feels weird telling people to kiss and touch and all that stuff. What would you say to them to get them more comfortable, to get them started with posing?
Yeah. First, call up some really good friends. That's a couple. Go do a practice session. Go out at sunset to a great location and just try different things.
Yeah.
That with them. Like just try different camera, different lenses, different combos, different, for me in those situations, I love shallow depth. I will be down at 1.2, 1.4. I will let my camera come in and out of focus and to create that kind of environment, that moment, try different frame rate. Like literally just go start having some fun and trying different looks that you want to implement into the way you might do a film. Because it's the same as working out. You have to build that muscle. You have to get that repetition going so that you can get really strong at it and more confident that you can handle the weight when you're in those certain situations.
Yeah.
And another way too is bring some music like in those situations. I mean, I always have a Bose Bluetooth speaker with different film playlists I've made for particular different moments or certain music, because it might calm the couple to feel and see what you're trying to do in the camera. Like they can hear a song and just kind of take that. And and I'm always telling couples too, like, I'm not here, just be in it. Just even if you just need to close your eyes and you just need to like feel each other breathe for a second, like that's great. Like, and go for it, because you're not giving them this like massive action being like, okay, now cry, now laugh, now hug, now kiss, now make out. It's like you can really lean into these like tender, soft, unspoken moments. And I think that's what a lot of people maybe are afraid to do, or they don't want to lean into do, or they're afraid they're going to step on the photographer's toes. And I'm letting people know, like, as long as you're just kind and communicate and you're practicing and you feel like you're a little bit prepared to try something, just go for it. Yeah. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? The couple says no, or the photographer acts like a little bit irritated for 2 seconds. In the span of a 10-hour shoot day, like, the photographer can be irritated for 5 minutes because you're also trying to do a good job for your client. And that's okay.
I think exactly what you said. Just go for it. I think a lot of people are so nervous about just like trying something and failing that they don't do anything. And it's like, at the end of the day, if you fail, you just move on. If that pose didn't work out the way you want, how many times have you worked and you're like, that wasn't it, but we're going to just keep on going. Well, the couple doesn't even have to know that it wasn't what you wanted. You just move on to the next thing, and things, turn out great. And like Jose Villa wrote his book. I probably read it 10 years ago when it first came out. And I remember him talking about like posing his couples. And he was like, I'll have people walk, and then I'll say, as you're walking, lean in for a kiss. Not because he wants them to kiss, it's because he wants them to like butt heads and then laugh about it afterwards. And just like little things like that, just have them do something that maybe is throwing them off, that doesn't make them feel super stiff. That's the main thing.
I always
get them moving.
Every year, I'm always like trying to work on the perfect prompts, the perfect way of describing what I want them to do. And usually I find out like every person is so different that I might as well just say whatever's on my head, because it's like I could say to one person like, hey, take your ring and like futz with your ring. Like, just kind of wiggle it around. I just want to see that motion. And one person's like, I got it. I know exactly what to do. Other person's like, they have no idea what, and it's like, okay, move on. Gotta try another one. And I would just tell people, like, the biggest tip I would give people is you must be verbal. Mm-hmm. You have to verbalize. If you don't verbalize, and I'm not saying yell or whatever, match the energy if you want, but like, you have to be verbal. You have to communicate if you want to learn to do posing. Yeah. That's the biggest thing I've learned from watching photographers is like every photographer I know, they have command over the situation. They don't just let it happen. Yep. Even though when they're like, oh, we let this moment happen. It's like, well, yeah, kind of, but you said the most beautiful thing you could ever say right before it in the best tone of voice you could ever say, and you brought a freaking stereo with you. Yeah. So you didn't just let it happen. You made it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, coming from photography. I feel like every photographer, they're in a rut on the wedding day. Like, it's not like, occasionally they're in a rut in the rhythm. Like, every day they're gonna have a situation or a moment where they're not fully sure where to go, how to pose them, what to do. That exists. And having cinematographers that are like idea driven, being like, what do you think about that, or whatever, they might just be like, thank you, like someone else is contributing to this moment as a team, and it ends up giving them a photo or a moment or a pose that actually worked out for them.
Yeah, you would like unlock them.
Exactly. Because I think photographers get tired of cinematographers, like you said, showing up and riding their coattails the whole day. Essentially, like well, oh, that's a cool pose. Like always over the shoulder, just taking their poses and then posting their work, being like, look at this film I did, as if, they were implementing creative direction and light choice and this. And so I think that level of just collaboration, communication goes a long way. So like this weekend I was in Miami. We were filming at Vizcaya, which is, it looks like Tulum. It's just this massive jungle looking garden on the ocean. And the photographer thankfully loves light just like as much as I do. So he had picked the spot and picked a moment, and we were in collaboration. And then when I just asked him, hey, when you're done with your shot, is it okay if I frame something? And of course he's like, of course. So once he's done, I asked the couple then to practice their first dance in this structure, in this perfect beam of light. And then because I implemented that, and now we have movement and I can do pan-ins and this, he was shooting just as much as I was and like loving it, because all of a sudden now his couple was doing these, these authentic movements and swings, and he dipped her and the photographer like loved it. And then of course he asked him then to like recreate the dip in a more static situation. And then we all high-fived and we like moved on to the next scene
fun.
because
everyone had a good time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the couple's having fun. We're having fun. Everyone's in light spirits because we know the ultimate goal when you're going into these is you're working for this sweet couple that is getting married. Like, full stop.
That's it.
You're not working for the planner. You're not competing with a photographer. It's you and yourself and your creativity doing your best to make this couple shine. Some weddings, you're going to get that creative freedom. Others, you're not. But at the end of the day, you're still going to walk away and make something, I think, that you're really proud of, even if it was technically a hard day.
Well, that's what Lindsay tells that story. He says, like, I was shooting this wedding with this big photographer, and he was like super nervous because he didn't want to like step on their toes. Lindsay from Le Rev. And then he's like, the guy goes, oh, do you want to do anything? And he's like, I'm good. And the photographer pulls him aside later in the day and he goes, listen, like, if I ask you if you want to do anything, can you please do something? Because I'm out of ideas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm just trying to buy time until I can like think of the next thing I want to be doing with the couple and whatnot. And that was like eye-opening for Lindsay, definitely eye-opening for me when I heard it. I was like, like.
That's what they mean when they ask you if you want anything. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not all of them, but I do think in general, when I have enough photographers I work with that I feel collaborative with to know that we're pulling ideas out of each other.
Yeah. It's exhausting. I mean, giving people direction, taking direction, being an actor is tiring. But also when you're actually being the person to like give idea, like I need to have a little bit of perspective. So giving that perspective to a photographer while they're working and you're kind of hopping in, doing a little bit of posing, gives them maybe a little bit of time to regenerate.
A little breather.
Yep. Take a look at, some places that might have some decent light and just,
think about how many as a filmmaker, how much of the day you're just sitting there fixing your camera or doing something. That photographer is interacting with people all day.
Right.
I can like go off and sit around and like do whatever I want to do. No one talks to me.
Yeah.
No one really needs me to be anywhere. I do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always said my team always laughs at this, that like being the wedding photographer on the day is harder.
Yes.
The edit's easier. The day is so hard. Everyone is looking to you to make decisions, to pick the light, pick the poses. Family members are coming to you with their grievances. And then as a filmmaker, the day is way easier, I feel like, because no one's coming to you to make those decisions. And then post-production's 5,000 times harder because you have so much that you're navigating and that you need to be technically savvy in. Like photographers are never going to have to worry about audio, which that in itself alone is, so difficult. You guys can relate to that and how much can go wrong just trying to even get decent. I'm not talking clean audio. Decent.
Oh, audio. It's live event audio's hard. Like, yeah, it's brutal. I was gonna ask about Super 8, Jared.
Yeah.
So I like shooting Super 8 from time to time. What I like about Super 8 is I just don't care how it looks. I just turn it on and shoot it at things. But in general, obviously there's more to it than just point it at something. What do you love the most about that medium?
Oh, I just love its romance. I love its warmth. I love its nostalgia. I love how the most mundane thing can be shot on 8mm, and then it's attractive all of a sudden. And so, I mean, it's a medium that I learned to use when I was in college at film school. It's something I've always leaned into and used for home life. I use it for my kids, like birthday parties. Like I put away all the digitals. Like we shoot birthday parties on 8 mil, and I love having those. Like my first child's birth is all on 8 millimeter, and it's dark, but I love it because it was in a hospital, and I could rewatch it with no audio or with music or whatever I want all the time. And there's something so timeless about film, regardless of the film stock. You know, from 8 mil to what 75. What is Nolan even using? Like 75 millimeter
Yeah.
stuff on in. It has a different look. It's attractive, and you can't imitate it. I think that's the other aspect of it, because I've seen people shoot digital and then try to make it look like 8 mil, and I can call that out almost 9 times out of 10.
Well,
Like
there's something
that's not
about
actually-
like the natural softness that you get from film. The color, okay, all that stuff. To me, it's always about the softness with the grain. It's like that look where, and even like the dimensionality of any camera, like where is the gun stock? Like, where are you holding the camera? That tells you how it moves and all that stuff. So it just, you would have to have you could never reproduce it. Even just the motion doesn't look the
The
same.
pop zooms that you can do with a Super 8, that's appropriate, and it just seems like Dad's, Super 8 in operating it. It's kind of awesome.
It's a lot of fun. So you're like the medium. You're using the medium. How is that like distinctly uncinematic thing kind of being implemented, I think, into a very cinematic workflow? How do you find that those things can naturally just coalesce when you're putting a piece together, where you have this like huge drive for storytelling and cinematography and more of like a film school style mixed with this like raw authenticity that comes with Super 8?
Yeah, I think right there it comes down to what we talked about earlier of like a good story narrative, a good 3-act structure that you're applying to weddings. And so you look at someone like a Quentin Tarantino who uses different film mediums in his stories, and it doesn't lose any essence of its cinematic line because they're all aiding the overall story. And so to me, having that medium which quiets things a little bit, it softens things a little bit in between the big push-ins, the big shots, the big movement. I call them like these little beats, as if you're writing a script. You're allowing it to take a quick pause and remind people of the intimacy of what this day really is. I like to give the camera to the couple, usually at least at one point in the day when I know they can't fail at it. I set it up, we have good light, and then I give it to them one by one. I say, okay, direct your partner, and I teach them how to just hold the trigger and make sure I have enough film to back it up, and they love it. And then we film them doing that on digital. So now I have this juxtaposition of being able to go from like a panning shot of like, the groom using the 8 mil to then the actual cut shot of the bride doing her dance or showing her ring or whatever it is on the 8 mil. And to me right there, that just continues that story arc of like their narrative. It allows them to show a little bit about who they are, because I'm not in control of what he's going to say or what they want each other to do or how they're going to laugh or what kind of moment it's going to create. We let it be. Yep. And 8 mil is the format that can translate that really, really well.
Yeah.
And so I love that.
I think a lot of filmmakers, wedding filmmakers, pretty unsophisticated in how they think about story structure. Not to rip on you guys that are listening, but let's be honest. And there's a reason we have our tropes and we know about how it works. And I love the idea of like the medium is the perspective shift, not the person. Like in a normal movie, you can say like, okay, we're going from first person to third person, or we're going to, like a Tarantino movie, we're going to follow Bruce Willis for a while, and then we're going to follow this character for a while. And so you get a lot of perspectives. You tell a more 3D story. You don't get to do that in wedding films all the time, at least. And so when you present these still moments, it's shot totally differently. It's coming from a totally different place. And like whether it be 16 mil or 8 mil or dad cams, VHS, like all that stuff, thinking about your work and saying, how do I present multiples of perspectives? It could be all on the same camera, but you shoot it differently. Sometimes you're shooting hand. That's why I like to shoot dance floor handheld. I don't do camera whips except on a dance floor. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, this is the perspective. I'm trying to create that perspective. And I think showing multiples of perspectives is wedding filmmaking. That's how you can tell a more diverse story without getting a bunch of, I've always resisted, Andrew. People go, oh, like, what are your wedding films like? Oh, I like story. I'm like, what do you mean by story? Lots of voiceover from the day. And I'm like, would you watch that movie? Would you watch a movie that was like, this is the story arc? Guy wakes up, has a good morning, has an even better afternoon. And by the end of the day, things are really good for this guy. Credits.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a good story. There's no tension. There's no arc. Right. And I think you can create simulated tension through having degraded footage and having a lot of different perspectives. So I love that from you, because I think it's such good insight, and you explained it so beautifully.
Andrew, in terms of, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say too, for people, if you're learning and trying, like whether you charge or not, like pre-wedding sessions are great too.
Yeah.
To get that narrative. And then that way too, you're also not competing with the photographer on the day, because you already know you've already shot something that is very story driven, that aligns with what you were trying to accomplish, which honestly takes a ton of pressure off on the wedding day, because you already have some stuff on the cutting floor, and you're like, oh, well, we already have this. We have this. Yeah. Okay. It's cool if that doesn't happen, or this different thing happens. And so with the 8mm, a lot of times we'll do that session on 8mm footage where I get full control with the couple to direct and do different things like that. Or sometimes I've done it the day after the wedding, because that's when the couple was free, and that's when they wanted to go, shoot something, wear something different location, and get a little bit more creative and get a little more deeper into that story arc, which is great. It's great when you have it. You don't always get it, but it is something to consider, designing into how you might tell your story or what you're engaging the couple to do.
Yep.
Andrew, talk a little bit like practically, someone who might be like a little bit intimidated getting into film because it's an actual like physical medium. Kind of break down your process, like someone who's just starting off, like what kind of camera should they get into? Who's your lab? Do they make it easy for you? Kind of break down just what your process is there.
Yeah. So one, I would say you have to be, don't do this or add this medium if you're like, oh, it'll make me some money, or it's like, I need another gimmick or this. Be passionate about like movies and this medium. Otherwise, don't do it at all, because it'll show in the quality of your work and how you process it. If you're into that, I can't recommend Pro 8mm enough. They're in Burbank. I'm sure everyone who's shooting on 8mm, they know them. I've been developing with them for a long time. I actually have the Canon 814s.
You got that?
I had two of them that I bought off eBay years ago that I'd been using. And then when they started refurbishing them, I just called them. I was like, hey, can you guys just do mine? And because I've used them so much, they were like, yeah, just send it over. So like they redid my Canon 814s that I already had.
Yeah,
and did all the bypass.
Let me just pause you there, because I think it's important for people to know. If you want to get into Super 8 and you buy cameras, most of them are actual garbage. They don't work. There's so many issues that can have with them, whether it be the internal batteries leaking, causing corrosion, fungus growing in the internal lenses, all kinds of issues. So make sure, like when I buy Super 8s on eBay, sometimes I'll buy 5 at a time, because I'll just be like, one of them is good. Like only 1 or 2 of them are going to be halfway decent. But that being said, like Andrew mentioned, Pro 8, not only do they do film development, and I don't know if they actually make the film, but they sell film. They do a lot of cool stuff. And one of the cool things they do is they refurbish and almost like modernize a lot of these cameras. So if you really want to get into it, just know that a lot of stuff you're going to buy on eBay is not going to work, and you might want to consider that.
No.
Yeah. And anyone that has messaged me on Instagram and had questions about it, or, if I've had different assistants come along and then they, at the end of the day, they're like in love with the format and shooting on the 8mm, I send them all directly to Pro 8mm and say, don't take the risk. It's an investment. If it's an investment for you, just buy what they've modded out. They have 3 different versions. They have their highest tier one, which I think is around like $5,000. So that's like, if you really want to go hard, like go for that. I can't recommend the Canon 814s enough, which is their mid tier.
Yeah, it's simplicity.
And I say that because, one, you get control over frame rate on the 8mm, which is hard to find. So to be able to change that from 18 frames per second to actual 24, so if you're doing hybrid films, you have a matching frame rate. It's fantastic. And then they do the mod. They get rid of the mercury battery, so you don't have to worry about the light meter having to use mercury, and everything runs through just AA batteries, including your light meter. So you can either switch to manual and change your aperture you want, or you can just leave it on auto and let that thing sit wide open, and the light meter is going to adjust based on the speed of the film that you put in. Yeah. So like you said, it removes the ability to really fail. As long as you are lighting it well, you're going to have a blast, and you're going to be super excited to get your film back and then kind of have that realization of like what that moment looked like. How did that play out? How did, light move or not move, and different things like that. And it's such a thrill. I mean, I love it. I love sending film out and getting it back from a motion picture standpoint.
And Pro8, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a program where you buy the film and then you send it back they do kind of everything. You don't necessarily have to buy the film on like B&H and then send it separately. Like you buy these packages and they'll be like, yeah, we'll send you the film, do the entire process, and you kind of buy it all up front. Is that kind of what you do, or do you kind of play around with your own film stock? What's the process there?
Yeah. For a while, I was ordering directly from Kodak.
Yeah.
Or like my favorite, and I love this, I love supporting local shops. So if anyone knows Sammys Cameras.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like Sammys sells Kodak 8mm. So for a while, I would just drive. It's a drive, but I love supporting the local photo shop. So I would drive in and buy directly from them. But cost wise, yes, it's more efficient to buy the different film variations that Pro8's mixing, which is they're still using the same stocks as Kodak. So you're gonna have 500T to 200T, 200, and I can get into like all the,
do a whole
the geek talk about like what does T mean, what does D mean, what does 50 like, how is that going to respond to light, and this and that. But buying that from them, they send it to you. You already are picking the quality of the scan you're going to get when you're done. So you shoot, you send it back, and then they're going to scan and digitize it based on what you selected. And then for me, they just put it on a hard drive and then they mail it back to me.
What I like about what they do over there is they also do a Rec 709 correction if you want it, which it's not that hard to correct that footage or whatever. So you don't have to pay for that, but you could literally order footage, get it scanned 4K, which a lot of actual people won't scan Super 8 4K. So I believe they do, right? Is it a 2K scan or a 4K scan?
Oh no, I think they do up to a 6K.
Yeah,
scan
they use
now. I mean, so
I
all
get
that a 5K scan.
Yep,
5K 4x3 framed, because I don't like seeing the sprocket. Yeah. I know a lot of people like to keep the sprocket in their process because they think it makes Super 8 footage look more Super 8, but I like to see it realized, as if I made a movie.
I like to be able to crop it as much as I want. I want to be able to like crop it any way I want vertically, so having those extra pixels. But regardless, they'll also color correct it and give it like a little more saturation, and so they could do whatever you want. They're a great company. We use Film Lab. Because they're in our area. They're in New Bedford. They're like 30 minutes from us.
Tricolor, isn't that what they're called?
No, Tricolor is a Kodak black and white stock.
I thought that was the name of their thing, though.
No, but Film Lab.
The thing I like about Pro8 though is they will always pick up the phone too and like talk you through your process, which is just like they're fairly big. I feel like everyone who uses film knows about Pro8, but you can always get someone on the phone and they'll just shoot the shit with you.
And by the way, this is not a sponsor of our show or whatever.
They're great though.
But
good resource.
They're just one of the few companies that is modernizing Super 8 niche. And do you remember the Super 8 that Kodak was said they were going to release?
Oh yeah, I know.
I was so excited about it.
I was talking to reps in New York years ago about it and being at conversations and trade shows, and they had quotes from like Christopher Nolan talking about the medium on the website, and then just nothing.
Yeah.
I talked to the rep
Nothing.
last year.
Yeah, if you talk to them now, they'll still tease you about it, man.
Yeah, he was like,
don't
"Oh
go down the
no,
rabbit
no."
hole.
He was like, "We're still." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Anyway,
We
Prove
were
it.
ready to like
That's just to say,
pre-order.
prove it.
Yeah, we were ready for the whole thing.
I would give them $3,000 for that.
Yep.
Like, I don't know why. I just because I remember I think it like had like some digital component to it.
Yeah, like time code.
Yeah,
or
it
something.
was supposed to be the vision was that you had a digital screen to see how it was going to light
Yes.
before you then pulled the trigger, which that would be it's game changer.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to have control and visibility before you record to the film stock.
I mean, can you imagine built-in ND filters too?
Yeah, I mean, it would be phenomenal. I
Anyway.
don't know why they're not moving it, but I love this conversation because when I was first started out in 8 mil, I was asking questions, but I mean, this was years ago. So it's like, I could only lean into who might be doing it or who have I worked with who's testing it. So for me, that was Amy McVeigh, Eric McVeigh's wife.
Oh yeah.
She had been doing some Super 8 when Eric would shoot, and same with Joel Serrato, Jose Villa's husband. Like he had been shooting some Super 8. And so when I first, it was just sending out an ask, just being like, hey, like, who are you developing? You know, and this, and I love creative collaboration. I love that they weren't like, oh, well, let me sell you my packet on how I use 8 mil. They're just like, oh yeah, totally. This is who I use, whatever. Like, go at it, have a blast. And I think that's why my posture is also like the creative community. Like, just ask and then geek out over conversations.
And it's supposed to be fun. They're, like if you want me to do business coaching for you, you better pay me. But but if you want to talk about cameras, I'll talk about cameras for free all day.
Totally.
Yeah, all day, forever.
I think it's important for a lot of people out there to realize like how small the community is too. Like, you know, we have 16,000 people in the Wedding Film School like Facebook group. You know, probably about half of that is active or maybe even still on Facebook, but it is a small community. So like if you're out there and you want to know something, all you have to do is ask. Most people are just normal dudes. Like, reach out to Andrew. I know that's something that's important to you. Reach out to us, even on our Instagram account. And, you know, all you have to do is ask, guys. And people are plenty willing to offer plenty of great advice. So, Andrew, thank you so much for your time, dude. It's been a long time coming. We've wanted to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for rescheduling.
Yep. And, you know,
no worries.
Good luck with your move coming up quickly. That's going to be pretty intense. Anything else that you want to add before
Are you selling anything? Is there anything anyone can buy from you? Do you have presets?
No. I am taking everything with me, and I don't sell anything. Eventually I might offer mentorships, but for right now, I'm just a guy with a camera that loves to go out and tell good stories and chat with anyone and everyone all the time. So I'm excited to build a stronger Nashville community. I have a lot of colleagues and coordinators out there that are phenomenal at what they do, and I'm actually excited to be able to get coffee with them and not just see them a couple times a year at a wedding, which is going to be pretty cool. So,
guys, follow Andrew on Instagram. We'll link his profile below. Besides that, Andrew, thanks for coming on the Wedding Film School show, and we'll see everyone again next week, same time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.